Hi, my name is Ada Jo. I'm a Snow Fellow 2020. The reason I want to do this project is my mission is to provide affordable nutrition for underprivileged community. During this pandemic, I see a lot of news about hunger. I'm just curious how the restaurant and MIT help fight with hunger. Without further ado, I want to share with you my slide. So from the research, I see a lot of restaurants are actually transforming the business into a grocery store. And some of them breaking the ingredients into a bulk package, sell to the customer, or even donate the product. And another part of restaurant, they actually change the business into sell ingredients or even selling the paper goods. And I'm just curious, like, okay, restaurants have innovative ways to fight with hunger. What MIT is doing? Before I jump into diagnose what MIT is doing or planning to do, I actually had privilege to interview with my classmate, with Susy, the office of Susy from MIT Office of Sustainable. Now here's the interview.
Yeah, so our office has 7 folks working in it, and we do work across sort of all the big systems of the campus. So we are trying to solve for energy and carbon neutrality and transportation and procurement and climate resiliency and greenhouse gas emissions and food. Food is an area that we started working in just a few years ago. So we're really still, I would say, building our capacity and our approach to a transformation at MIT. So some of the work we're doing is certainly still in development, and I think there's a lot of great people who we've been sort of building a great cohort of people over the last few years to look at these issues and where our sort of strategy around sort of the sustainability and the food security of the food system. So at the same time we were asking questions about sustainability, David Randall in the dean's office was also asking good questions about food security on campus, and that really reignited, I think, my passion for doing food systems work using that model, which I really learned in Philadelphia, where you can't separate food access and sustainability. They're really really intertwined. And so there was this opportunity to not talk about those two things in isolation, and that's always been sort of the approach I've taken. So all my food access work is really sustainability work together. And so some of the sort of concrete areas that we're working on are certainly MIT has a number of different vendors on campus that provide food for the campus. And so really developing, not, again, unlike that Philadelphia model, but really developing a relationship with the businesses and the food workers that are cooking and really the experts about the food on the campus. So it's building those vendor partnerships and thinking about, okay, what new purchasing strategies do we want to try out to accomplish X, Y, or Z? How can we begin setting some goals around, whether it's local procurement or healthy food or affordable food. So it's really about building strong vendor partnerships. So I think there's a vendor side to the work. There's also, I think, something that MIT students care a lot about, as do we, is food waste on campus as well. So there is a really interesting intersection between, I think, food waste, sometimes called waste, although many people don't ever think any kind of food is a waste, but between food waste and food security, and making sure that any surplus food that we do have, we're able, first and foremost, to be able to feed that to people. So there's all these ways of, not just like looking at, oh, waste is just this issue where we just want to throw that in the compost and get that program up and running. But again, always looking at things through the lens of people and community and food access. So whether that's waste or procurement, I think that there's also, some of the work that we had begun doing, although now we're in such a virtual space, but is really thinking about, just building that community, both the indoor and the outdoor spaces on campus, and sort of looking at sort of where we're eating and are we eating together, and is there that sort of like community of food and cooking that revolve around, some of these core values that I think we all want to nurture on our campus. So, and then, there's I think always room for sort of innovation and experimentation. So I think where I'm excited to go in the future is, not only thinking about how you approach a food system with best practices, but what are the experimental practices that students, that researchers want to sort of try out on campus and say, hey, here's a really cool idea to solve for food security and food waste at the same time. Or here's a, type of retail environment we want to create in order to serve affordable food to people on the go. So there's a lot of room for innovation and experimentation, sort of creating the campus as a living lab that we were just sort of starting to get to. And I hope in our new environment, the future, we get to explore those things too.
So Susy really addressed the MIT initiative with sustainability and food. She also talked a lot about the innovation dining experience happening at MIT. That drove me to my next question. So what next? Now pandemic has happened. What what impact it had with the partnership Susy just referred to? Let's see what she's talking.
How is COVID-19, affecting the relationships that your office has with your local partners?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. And on the one hand, it feels like we have been in this forever, that the pandemic has lasted forever. And on the other hand, it has been, just a couple months. So I think what we've seen in the last couple months is certainly the campus. The campus has needed to shrink its operations literally. So we needed, as you guys know so intimately, we needed to move students out. We needed to reduce the footprint of the campus, and we needed to make sure that everybody first and foremost was safe. And part of that, of course, is making sure people have access to healthy food. So that was really has been, I think, the priority for the last couple months. And so I think because of that shrinking, some of the sort of innovative work that we've been pushing we've had to press pause on that a bit, and I think that's okay. I think, as I mentioned, those kind of emergency priorities are absolutely necessary right now. I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but I think that there are, in spite of how terribly challenging this pandemic has been, I think it's actually exposed a lot of opportunities within the food system to build connections moving forward. But last year, MIT Dining was the recipient of a food innovation prize to start building a network of folks in the city and in Massachusetts to actually solve for that one of those tricky problems of surplus food, our supply chain, sort of how to entice people in a community to eat this food if we cook it in these innovative ways. And so we're actually just on the cusp of doing that work. And now I think more than ever, that kind of work is so ultra relevant. So while we've had to a little bit pause on the innovation work for now, I'm hoping we get to come back to that with a real renewed sense of the kind of food system we want to create and the kind of people we want to build up and support through this work.
I was super delighted to know that MIT already take a lot of initiative to help supporting local community and doing a lot of different projects. And then we're just curious, what kind of change the pandemic have reinforced MIT? Like what kind of like new system provided for MIT to actually create? Let's see what Susan is talking about. Sorry.
We were also wondering, based on your experience with developing healthy and sustainable communities, what are the new systematic challenges that COVID-19 has created? Yeah,
I mean, I think that the challenges have always been here, and I think now they've really been exacerbated. And like I said, I think that there's been a consciousness that's been raised around some of these systemic issues that I think now we're seeing very clearly up close and personally. So the latest, reporting has just been around the vulnerability of like the meat processing sector. And so I think that opens up a lot of conversations around the role meat plays in our diet and the working conditions of people working in meat processing facilities. And from a sustainability perspective, that's a conversation we've been having for a while now, and now it's really part of our we're really grappling with that at a national scale. So I think we're seeing that unfortunately unfold right now in the meat sector specifically. I think we've also probably all read some stories around, you know, just seeing pictures of all the milk some of the dairy farmers are having to dump, or the, you know, vegetables that have been grown for restaurants and universities that are no longer purchasing them, and what's happening to those. And in many cases, I think, you know, a big chunk of some of these harvests, they're trying to figure out how to redirect them, and I think in some cases it's going to waste. So I think we're really getting up close and personal about sort of the vulnerability of sort of those supply chains between farm and consumers. And I hope moving forward we can think through how to make those more resilient, because, you know, there is all of this food, and in many cases it's not getting to people who need food. And so that's a challenge, right? That is just ripe for a solution, a future where we have better mechanisms for connecting the food that we're growing with the people that need the food. And right now that's not happening elegantly in every case at all. So I think we need to, think through how to make those supply chains much more resilient moving forward. And I think, you know, I think that there has been, in some cases, there's been, I think, a renewed interest, or folks are, I think, connecting to local farmers in ways that they may not have in the past. Or, you know, there are these wonderful CSA programs, community supported agriculture programs, where you essentially can like buy a share of the harvest and get a box that either arrives at your door every week, or you go and pick up in a parking lot, you know, someplace, and there is like, you know, 3 people you interact with along that chain, and essentially you can sort of talk to that farmer that has just grown that food for you. And so I think we've seen CSA subscriptions and things like that going up right now, because people feel safer in many cases doing, you know, buying their food through that channel than even, you know, going to a busy supermarket. But again, if you talk about food security and access, that option is not available for everyone, right? So that's not necessarily a solution for everyone. But it is wonderful to see, I think, a resurgence in that sort of like farmer to consumer connection. But, you know, at the same time, we've seen, you know, as folks lose their jobs, just the need for food assistance programs going way up. And I don't know if you guys saw the pictures of just the, you know, the lines of cars waiting to get food from food pantries and things. So, so we're seeing, you know, what happens when folks lose their job and need to rely on food assistance programs. And yet we have all this milk that we're dumping at our farms because not all the pantries and so forth have the mechanisms to store and distribute that amount of surplus food from farms. So these are issues that have always been there, and I think now we're seeing them really clearly. You know, moving forward, I think we'll have a lot of lessons learned to deliberate over as we think about what does that future food system look like, and where can we, you know, learn from our sort of mistakes and build something more resilient for the future.
The future is coming, and MIT already taking initiative to be innovative leader in this field. Now I want to turn to my classmate, or you can observe yourself, see what you can do next. Thank you.